Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Petrie and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 14th of October. First up, Rangers are still looking for a new manager.
The problem here is that Rangers need to find a manager of stature and a manager who knows what it's all about.
Is Danny Rohl now the leading candidate for the Ibrox hot seat? And a playoff spot has been guaranteed for Scotland.
Robertson teases it back in. Here's a chance. There's the goal from Scott McDermott. And that should wrap things up. That should settle the nerves. That should seal the 3 points.
Hampden wins over Greece and Belarus gave us 6 vital points, but 2 uninspiring performances left more than just the fans unhappy.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. We can be honest with that. It doesn't exactly feel like a win at the minute. I think you can see that by our reaction at the end, which is hugely frustrating. Obviously the performance was, nowhere near the standard that we need it to be.
We'll discuss how positive or not we should feel after the World Cup qualifiers.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, I'm delighted to be joined by the Daily Record sports writer Scott McDermott and former Rangers, Dundee and Falkirk striker Rory. Gents, we'll dive right into the managerial search at Ibrox. We heard a few nights ago that Steven Gerrard is no longer in the running. There seems to be 2 names at the front of the race. One of those is former Sheffield Wednesday manager Danny Rohl. Scott, is he the leading candidate at the moment?
I think he probably is, Andrew, from everything that we're hearing. We know Rangers have spoken to Danny Rohl. We know they spoke to him before they appointed Russell Martin, so he's obviously been on their radar for a while. Is he the right guy for Rangers? I'm sure Rory will have his own opinion. Not for me, not for what Rangers need at the moment. Well, I think he's a very highly rated young coach. Sheffield Wednesday's his only managerial gig so far, but it has worked at a high level with Germany and Bayern Munich as Hansi Flick's, or one of Hansi Flick's assistants. I spoke to Barry Bannon a couple of days ago, as obviously he's captain at Sheffield Wednesday, and he rates him as the best coach he's ever worked with. But look, I've covered Rangers for a long time in this job. I've watched them for a long time, even as a kid growing up watching them. I'm not saying I know everything about them, but I think I've got a kind of fair idea of what Rangers need in a manager, in terms of the type of manager, the type of person. And I think in Rangers' situation at the moment, the predicament they find themselves in, both in the league, but also just historically the last 10, 15 years in terms of lack of success, lack of trophies, I think they need a specific type of manager right now, and I'm not sure if with all due respect to Danny Rohl, a 36-year-old coach coming for the English Championship is exactly what they need. But that's where they are at the moment. I think the process has been a bit of a mess, if I'm honest with you, with the whole Steven Gerrard saga, obviously for the last week or so, which kind of came to an end on Saturday night. They now seem to be scrambling about again. I think there's different things at play within Rangers. I think there's different opinions now within Rangers as to what they actually need in terms of between the hierarchy, the owners and the board, and also within the kind of football department, Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy and people like that. And they're scrambling about a wee bit. I think they wanted to get a new manager in before the next Premiership game against Dundee United. And unless they get that done in the next 24 to 48 hours, that would seem unlikely. So it's not a great position to be in. But yeah, it looks like Danny Rohl. There's a couple other names, Kevin Muscat, Slaven Bilic, seem to be on the radar as well. So let's see what happens the next couple of days.
You mentioned kind of the profile that he's got there. Rory, are you surprised that Danny Rohl seems to be kind of one of the leading candidates, given there are a few similarities to Russell Martin's profile as well?
There are some similarities in that, they've both managed it, the Championship in England and, with varying degrees of success. I know Sheffield Wednesday haven't had their troubles to seat with financial issues and things which worked against Danny Rohl, of course. Scott saying, Barry Bannon saying he's the best coach he's ever worked with. I just don't think Rangers fans want to hear that again. It's good for players to be saying that, but that's one thing that the board said about Russell Martin before appointing him, and that those words haunted him. I think the whole Steven Gerrard issue has been a bit of a nightmare, to be honest with you. I don't. I'm very sceptical about the idea that the timing wasn't right. You don't get on a plane and fly to London and sit down and have talks. If the timing's not right, then you're ruled out early doors. Along with like Sean Dyche, who made it very clear he wasn't interested. He is, having been Rangers before and having a degree of success, he is, for me, using that as an out, because for me, somewhere along the discussions, in the line of discussions, it's broken down because Steven Gerrard's not confident for whatever reason in the structure, and that is a major issue. Now you move on to the next managerial candidate, and I agree with Scott in terms of you need a manager that's going to come in and win trophies, have this aura, have this presence first and foremost, away from being a coach. Rangers traditionally have had managers, but who is that? Where do you get him? And can you afford him? And does he want the job? Steven Gerrard's turned it down. Russell Martin failed miserably. The scenes at Falkirk Stadium would have travelled around a good part of Europe. I just think it's a bit of a basket case at the moment in terms of the next manager, because I don't think the Rangers job at this moment in time is as attractive as it maybe once was.
And Scott, you talked about kind of your own reaction to the Danny Rohl kind of candidacy, I suppose. Do you think a large section of the Rangers fans would have a similar reaction to that appointment? We obviously saw what they thought of Russell Martin. We saw that from really early on in his tenure as well. Do you think Danny Rohl would kind of get the same reaction, really?
Yeah, I think the majority are very sceptical, Andrew. And look, it's probably a wee bit unfair on Danny Rohl, because I do think he's different to Russell Martin. Having spoken to Barry Bannon and a few others that kind of know him and have worked under him, he's not a kind of possession for possession's sake manager. He's not a guy that's about 100 passes and playing out for the back. From everything I've heard, he's very adaptable. If his teams need to go direct, they'll go direct. He's very kind of game specific, opposition specific. He'll look at different opponents and come up with a plan to win that specific game. So some of the things I've heard, I've liked, and I've thought would be pretty good. But as Rory says, the Rangers fans, it's not going to wash with them after Russell Martin. If you think of, Steven Gerrard obviously been the prime target. If they'd have got Gerrard, you think about this game on Saturday at home to Dundee United. If Steven Gerrard had been unveiled as manager, Ibrox would be absolutely rocking on Saturday. I mean, 50,000 packed out. You'd imagine with that kind of fervour, they would go and win the game. You feel as if they would start to get a bit of momentum. There'll be so much goodwill there for Gerrard coming in. If you flip that and it's Danny Rohl, you can just see fans turning up, pretty quiet, almost waiting for the next mistake, waiting for the first Dundee United goal, waiting for the first bad substitution so they can then go and pounce on this manager. It's complete opposites. For me, I don't know what Rory thinks. For me, the answer's staring Rangers in the face. The answer for Rangers is Derek McInnes at the moment, and I know that's not what Hearts fans will want to hear. I know it might be difficult to go and get him, but in years gone by, Rory's talking about tradition. Rangers would decide who they want as manager and just go and get him. And
there's a bit of an issue with that, Scott, in that they've already had one manager walk away. That is a big risk, because if Derek McInnes shoots them down instantly, it's happened again. This board are under severe pressure if that happens again. If Derek McInnes enters into talks and he doesn't like the structure, well, there's a major issue there, because anybody who wants to be a figurehead of the club is now coming in and saying, no, there's an issue there. Yeah. In terms, Danny Rohl as well, he's not done enough. He's not got enough. Of course, he's got experience and exposure at a high level as a coach and a first team coach and a whatever it may be. But you can't, after a handful of games at Sheffield Wednesday, merit being appointed the Rangers manager, in my opinion. And this whole, he's the best coach I've ever worked with. Technically, and, out on the grass and all the niceties of it and it's a totally different ballgame at Rangers and Celtic. And I don't think, without being too harsh, he merits the Rangers job. I really don't. I don't think he's had enough exposure and experience. There seems to be an idea these days that, you interview somebody 5, 6, 7 times, you go through this process, they speak well. Oh, they play this well and they've got their inverted fullbacks and they've got this and they've got... No, that's... you look at Ange Postecoglou, who came in with a wealth of experience in other countries, a very dominant presence, a figurehead of the club, and he brought success. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to turn into Ange Postecoglou, and you may go down that path and it doesn't work, but I just don't think Danny Rohl's the answer.
But Rory, this is the problem. I've been saying it for a while now at Rangers. There's nobody, in high up positions at Rangers who really understands the club and the environment and what's required to be a Rangers manager. People making huge decisions at that club who have no experience of that, no, with all due respect to...
They do have experience of it though, Scott, because they just appointed Russell Martin and they're about to appoint Danny Rohl, and it's the backgrounds are so similar, so you don't need to have experience and understand the club to know that profile of manager isn't going to work.
Oh yeah, of course, after Russell Martin, what I'm saying is before Russell Martin, they've already made a bad decision, and the same people who don't understand are about to go and make another decision, and that's a major problem from that. Should never have been allowed to happen in the first place. There has to be someone in there at that club who understands the landscape, understands the environment in the club, what's required to be a Rangers manager. They clearly don't. They've made a huge mistake initially. But when Russell Martin went, we were told that Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marathi were going to take over this process for that very reason, indicating that they weren't happy with that first Russell Martin appointment. But here we are days later after Gerrard talks have broken down, and suddenly the likes of Thelwell and that have come back into the equation, and that's why we're seeing these names. The whole thing is a mess.
Are there any names, Scott, apart from Derek McInnes, that you think might be a step in the right direction? Obviously, Kevin Muscat, I think it's said that he's admired by some very high up at Rangers. St Mirren manager Stephen Robinson's been mentioned. You mentioned Slaven Bilic yourself. Any of those names do you think would unite the fan base at all?
I must admit, Andrew, none of them really excite me too much. I don't think excite the fans too much. Muscat, maybe for the reasons Rory talks about with Ange Postecoglou, similar kind of background, seems to have a bit of stature about him, a bit of presence. We all know what he was like as a player. He's had success, albeit in Australia and Japan, and again, that's the argument. Does that really merit you the Rangers job? At least he's played for the club, so he does have some kind of understanding. But again, for Rangers to find themselves in this position where you're looking at the two main candidates for the job are Kevin Muscat and Danny Rohl. If that doesn't tell you what a bad position Rangers are in, then I don't know what does.
And Rory, as the days kind of go on, we're getting closer and closer to that next game at Ibrox. Is there a possibility that Rangers, might have to appoint an interim if this search keeps going on? Should Barry Ferguson and our own pundits, Neil McCann and Billy Dodge, should they be keeping their phones on?
Oh, well, listen, you never know in football. I don't think they'll want to go down the interim route for a second. And I also think if Barry Ferguson was given the phone call, he may be tempted to say, look, I ain't coming back on an interim basis. I stepped in and, I did well. I think when they came in at the back end of last season, they were given an almost impossible task to try and do enough to earn the job outright. But I don't think as much as he probably would like to come back in as interim, if I was Barry Ferguson, I'd be saying, well, if you want to have a conversation, let's talk about me being the manager. I don't see that scenario cropping up personally. I think we'll want to appoint a permanent manager. They seem kind of desperate to get that done, but they need to strike the balance now of doing their due diligence, but getting them in, not really quickly, but relatively quickly. Don't think he needs to be in before Saturday, but the problem you've got there is if the mood around Ibrox isn't great and they drop more points, they're so far off it, it's just crazy, and they're majorly running the risk at this point, the way Hearts are playing, that they're going to fall so far behind Hearts that third is going to be their aim. I know that's a bit disrespectful to Hearts, who sit top of the league at the moment, but I just personally think Celtic will have enough to finish the league first. So, aye.
And of course, if Muscat's the man, Andrew, there's talk that they need to wait, 3, 4, 5 weeks to get him in because he's coming to the end of the season in China. I think he's going for a title over there. Again, it's just not an ideal scenario. As Rory says, they're so far behind. I mean, to have any chance of kind of clawing themselves back into a potential title race, they need to get someone in now and hit the ground running. By winning that game on Saturday and getting the place going again. So that wouldn't be the ideal scenario either.
The last thing I would say on this, Andrew and Scott as well, is that I think myself and Scott both have mentioned a couple of times that the people or the managers' names in the window for it don't merit the job. But I think the major issue is people who merit the job don't want the job.
Let's get on to the Scotland men's national team. It's been a weird few days, an emotional rollercoaster as Steve Clarke's side eventually got the job done, but in pretty underwhelming circumstances. A playoff place for the World Cup has been secured after wins against Greece and Belarus at Hampden. Rory, do Scotland fans need to get a grip of themselves a wee bit? Should we be happy enough with the results, or was it actually pretty concerning?
I think in terms of performance, if you continue to perform like that, then you are not going to win games the way we have won the last two. That's just a given. If you're underperforming at that level, you're going to get punished eventually. However, you've got to caveat that with the fact that we're now sitting on 10 points. Steve Clarke's made it very clear he was extremely unhappy after the first half against Belarus. I took my boy to his first ever Scotland game against Greece last week, and after 60 minutes, he's only 9. He was starting to lose a bit of interest. Then we're right behind the goal that Scotland were shooting into the second half. Then after 60 minutes, boom, goal, and that was him back alive again. And you could see him falling in love with the atmosphere and the singing and all the rest of it. And then we scored 2 more, which is massive because look, Greece are a good side. We didn't play well, but we won. I would much rather have underwhelming performances and pick up points at this stage than these glorious disasters of beating Greece then losing to Belarus, which is a tradition that Scotland fans of a certain generation are used to. So look, I think to be in this position is huge. I think we just need to calm down a wee bit with regards to the last 2 performances, because I don't think we can play that poorly again, touch wood.
And Scott, Rory touched on it there. John McGinn said it was as wild as he'd seen Steve Clarke. Scott McKenna, I think, said he was fuming at half-time as well. Clarke seemed to be pretty honest after the game, which if we're being honest, we don't always get. What did you make of his post-match comments?
I thought it was quite clever, Andrew, for Steve Clarke, because like you, post-match the other night in the auditorium at Hampden, I mean, we expected Steve Clarke to come in and say, look, wasn't the best performance, but winning's all that matters. This condensed kind of qualification system, the way this group is, 3 points are all that matters. But as Rory says, the performances were so bad in those 2 games at Hampden, it felt as if the players probably did need a wee dig. And I think players and teams occasionally do need that, just that wee reminder of standards and what's acceptable. So I actually thought it was really refreshing the other night, ahead of this kind of massive double header in November. I thought he played it quite cutely the other night by having a wee dig at the players and just, as I say, just reminding them of what he expects. Because the performance wasn't good. I totally agree with Rory. I mean, I'd much rather you just want the points in the bag. You're going for a World Cup. I mean, performances don't matter too much, but you can't keep playing like that. I mean, especially the Belarus game. I mean, geez, I mean the kind of nerves were shredded in that game. I mean, just you're turning up expecting a comfortable, working at the game, doing the match reports. That you're turning up think this will be. It might not be brilliant, but be comfortable 2-0. I mean, I was at the Belarus away game in Hungary, and Scotland had far more control in that game than they did the other night. Same when we played Greece away in the Nations League playoff. I know we had to defend well in the second half when we won 1-0, but we had a lot of control in that game in the first half. So much more than we did against Greece at Hampden. So, they need to improve. They need to play better. I think there's a few players in that team who are kind of really out of form at the moment, certainly in terms of the national team. So, I thought Clark was quite clever. Just giving them that wee dig after the game, I think should stand them in good stead for what's going to be a massive, massive month in November.
And Rory, in terms of that playoff place that Scotland have secured, should we be happy enough with that, or is that actually going to be quite a difficult route for Scotland to get to the World Cup? Should we really now be wanting to push forward and top the group?
Well, we're on 10 points with 2 games to go, so absolutely. I mean, I don't... Ultimately, what we want is a shootout at Hampden against Denmark. That entails going to Greece and picking up at least a point. If they get a point in Greece, Denmark will take care of Belarus. We need to win it on points. It means that we come back to Hampden, we play Denmark, and we just need to win the game. Straightforward. So if we can go to Greece and get something, which we're capable of and we've done before, probably didn't merit the 1-0 win over there, but certainly would deserve to come away with a point, I would suggest. I think it's all eyes on first place. I really do. Playoff is a tough route, and you need to win a couple of games to get there. So let's just try and wrap it up and get it in the bag beforehand. And I hope for Steve Clarke's tenure in charge of Scotland, because overall, whilst there's been some underwhelming moments, the good times have been there in abundance, especially during qualification campaigns. And I think, if Scotland don't qualify, these 2 games against Greece and Belarus and these moments will be remembered negatively. Whereas if we qualify, nobody will ever talk about it again, and that's just the way it works. But I think it's a little bit of a concern. Scott McTominay couldn't really get involved in the game. I do understand he scored a goal against Belarus. I thought he was anonymous against Greece, completely anonymous, and he comes up with the goal against Belarus, but other than that, he was, again, can't count one hand how many times he touched the ball and got involved with the play. I think more battling players, the likes of Ferguson and Gilmour's good on the ball, but he gets around and he breaks up play. These players probably stood out more because we were lacking creativity. So I think to try and look at McTominay and get the best out of him is going to be key moving forward. But as Scott says, these performances will catch up with you eventually. I just hope it's not in the next 2 games and we can turn around a bit of form.
I do, Andrew. I do think you mentioned the crowd in that earlier. I do think Steve Clarke, he would never say it, but I just got the sense that he's slightly disappointed in the fans in the last couple of games. I mean, we're on the verge of a World Cup. Whatever you think of the performance the other night, Scotland still hung on and won the game, and yet there was kind of jeers and boos at the end, which seemed very strange to me, despite the performances. And they're going to massively need the home crowd hopefully against Denmark, if it is this, if we do set up this cup final, if you like, to go and get to the World Cup. And as I say, look, I get that players have to inspire fans most of the time. They need to give them something to shout about. I get that, but the atmosphere at the last 2 games has been very different, compared to the kind of Euro 2024 campaign. I mean, I know we had a lot of momentum and we beat Spain and we were playing better, but I did just get the sense that the fans maybe taking things for granted a wee bit, and maybe kind of just waiting for the players rather than getting the whole place going. And I think that has to change, especially if we set up this kind of do or die game against Denmark, because they're going to need the home crowd right behind them.
Yeah, there does seem to be a little sense of some Scotland fans are maybe getting a little bit tired now, and perhaps the same could be said for Steve Clarke. Perhaps is almost enough for him. Do we think we are coming to the end of the Steve Clarke era, Scott? And do you think the SFA are probably doing some continuity planning in the background already?
I think they should be. Whether they are or not, I'm not sure, but they should be. I think Steve Clarke's always said to him last week at the press conference, the World Cup means so much to him. Even when he was qualifying for Euros, he kept talking about the World Cup as the real pinnacle for him. He wants to be the guy that gets Scotland back to a World Cup. It means a lot to him personally. He missed out as a player, I think twice, when he was disappointed not to be in squad. So, no, for me, this will be it. If we don't get there, Steve Clarke will walk away at the end of his contract, and the SFA will need to have the new guy lined up. And I think, look, even if we got there, as I say, I think that would be the moment for him. That would be the pinnacle. Whatever happened in America, Canada, and Mexico, I think that would be it. And he'd be able to look back with real pride. He's now beat Craig Brown's record for the amount of games in charge of Scotland. He'd be able to say it took us to three major finals, which, whatever you think of him, would be an incredible achievement. So, no, I think we are coming towards the end. And as you say, the SFA are going to need to start thinking about who that replacement's going to be.
And that's us coming to the end of this podcast as well. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day. So to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on your phone. All that's left for me to do is thank our guests, Scott McDermott and Rory Loy, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.
It's petty, it's ill-informed.
Are President Trump's cuts having an adverse effect on research?
It's pandemonium.
What number's that in the periodic table?
PD, number 47. I don't know.
I've done the shooting clays before. The longer you do it, the sorer obviously it gets.
When Craig said there he'd been shooting the clays, I imagined him out a back line. Somebody's washing, you know.
William Shatner, his secretary, contacted me to say, when Bill has a question now and again, can he contact you? And then one time he called me up and he wanted to know, David, what is a photon? I'm thinking, this is incredible. Captain Kirk wants to know what a photon is, you know.
I once met a guy who referred to a globe as a ball map. A ball map.
Look at the ball map.
What we normally do is spin the ball map and we see where we go on holiday.
The Off the Ball podcast, available every Monday on BBC Sounds.